Hi everyone, my name is Cameron O'Connor. I am a junior environmental science major at Washington and Jefferson College, and this is my capstone presentation about my internship this past summer at Penn's Cave and Wildlife Park. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to go over a few main key points. First, just a bit of general information about the facility I worked at and about some history of the cave. Then I'm going to go into my job specifically, what my responsibilities were, and what I learned from the job and from the experience overall. Then I will go into some other opportunities that are available at Penn's Cave specifically, and then also some other opportunities that this job could have opened the door for me to experience at other locations in the future. And then I'm going to end on some advice I have for future environmental science students that are looking for an internship, or just future science majors in general looking for an internship, and especially trying to navigate that area during the times that we're in right now. So firstly, some background information about the cave. Penn's Cave and Wildlife Park is located in Center Hall, Pennsylvania, which is about 20 minutes outside of State College area. If you're familiar with Penn State University or State College, it's about 20 minutes outside of there. The property consists of 1,600 acres that consists of the cave itself, the wildlife park. There's a farm on the property. There's also a hotel. It's no longer an active hotel, but it was at one point. And there's a visitor center, and there's also even a private airport on the property. So it's quite a large bit of land. A fun fact about Penn's Cave is that it is America's only all-water cavern and wildlife park. So it is the only cavern in the world that is completely water. There's no sort of walking areas through the cave. It can only be navigated by boat. And it also has, the property also has a wildlife park, like I mentioned, and that's the only one in America that has both. So that's pretty cool. Then going into some history about the cave. So the Seneca Native Americans were the ones that inhabited this area before colonizers got here, and they used the cave for centuries, mostly as shelter and protection. And then when colonizers got here, they discovered the cave in 1795, and then they started commercially using the cave for tours about 100 years later in 1885, but they've been doing tours there ever since. So this is their 135th year there doing tours. There's also some legends about the cave that have influenced popular culture, or just culture in general, around this area. So the main one in particular is about the Native American princess who lived in this area, and when the colonizers got here, she fell in love with one of the French colonizers, but this was forbidden in her tribe. She was not allowed to marry him, so the two of them decided to try and run away together, but they were eventually caught by the chief and the chief's sons, which were the princess's brothers, and the group of men threw the colonizer into the cave as punishment for trying to run away with their daughter and their sister. And legend has it that the man died in there. And the name of the princess was actually Princess Nittany. So if you've heard of the Nittany lion, the name Nittany is Nittany Mountain. It's pretty common in that area, and legend has it that that's where that name comes from. So that's a cool little bit of history. So my job mainly was focused on environmental education. So meaning I would drive people in this boat throughout the cave and educate them about the cave itself, how it was formed, the different formations in the cave, and just a bunch of other things that I will touch upon briefly in this presentation. So first, I talk about the cave, how it was formed. Basically, groundwater would seep through the cracks of the limestone, and it would mix with different minerals and form a carbonic acid that would carve away at the rocks underneath the ground, and eventually the water level would recede, and it would leave this open cavity underground with a steady stream of water underneath it. The water that fills up the cave actually comes from an underground stream. So that's how the cave was formed, and that's how it's still maintaining this water level even now. We also talked about the formations, so stalactites and stalagmites. They form when water drifts through the cracks in the ceiling, but through the ground, and it deposits minerals along the way, and those will make those formations. So stalactites are the ones that are on the ceiling, and stalagmites are the ones that grow from the ground up. We also really stressed preservation of the cave. Cave has been growing for millions of years. It's an actively growing cave, and it's very sensitive and delicate. Like I said, it's taking millions of years for it to look this way, and we want to preserve that as much as we can, while also appreciating it for its beauty and the education that it can provide us. But we really stress not touching any of the rocks or the formations, because we have natural oils on our hands that can stop the formations from growing. It can create kind of a barrier that will stop like I said, the formations from growing, and we don't want to do that. So no touching anything in the cave. And then we also talk about, there's a section in the cave where you can see a lot of black kind of deposits on little pockets of the rock, and that's actually soot. So when they used to do tours before they had electricity, they would use torches to light their way, but there's not a lot of ventilation in the cave, so the smoke from the torches would collect in pockets of the rock and deposit soot, and that soot has remained there for 100 years. So and it will most likely remain there for forever. So we really talk about how any sort of impact we have on the cave is long lasting, and so we want to, like I said, admire the cave and learn from it, but also protect it as much as we can. And let's talk about the biodiversity. Inside the cave, there's not many things live inside the cave, because natural sunlight cannot reach the center of the cave or anywhere really apart from the entrances. So plant life cannot grow inside the cave. You might see some small insects, some little crickets, things like that, even some frogs towards the entrances. But not many things actively live inside the cave, because there's not any food sources and it's completely dark, so it's hard to navigate. There are, however, bats that will live in the cave. There can be thousands of bats in there at a time when they hibernate there in the winter. And then there actually was a beaver that lived in the cave when I was there this past summer. Supposedly it's been there for a while, and it just sort of uses the cave as its already personally made dam, and it uses that for shelter and protection, and it'll leave the cave to get food and then come back and stay there. So that's pretty cool. We also stress the importance of local biodiversity when we talk about the wildlife park. So all the animals in the wildlife park are native to North America. So we have some mountain lions, some foxes, white-tailed deer, local biodiversity, which I think is incredibly important for people to not only care about the exotic animals that people tend to think about when they think of wildlife, but also the animals that they could see in their own backyard. I think local biodiversity is really important to stress. And then there's also some sustainable energy that we talked about with relating to the cave. So there's a lake, a man-made lake that's at the end of the cave that overflows onto a nearby creek. And in the early 1900s, they would use that flow of water for hydroelectricity to power the cave. So the cave actually had electricity before a lot of other places in the area, because of this use of this, alternative energy source, which I think is really interesting and really cool. And some other skills I learned that are not necessarily EVS related are how to drive a boat. I never knew how to do that before, and I didn't think I would ever learn, but I had to drive a boat both forwards and backwards. Technically, we would drive it in both directions when you would go through the cave one way and come back the other way, so that was cool. Communication was a big one. Like I said, my job was environmental education, so if I could not communicate my knowledge effectively, then I couldn't do my job. So that was really important. I really wanted people to take something away from their time in the cave and at the wildlife park, and to walk away being maybe a little more eco-conscious or environmentally friendly. That was the goal. Time management was a big one. These tours can be on a very tight schedule when during the busy months in the summer, so you really have to be on it with your time management skills, and that was something I definitely learned. And then of course, just customer service skills. Any job that you have working with other people, which is most of them, you just learn how to better cooperate with your coworkers and, communicate with them and also with the visitors as well. So that was a main skill that I learned also. So this is just a map of the cave. This shows where we would do our tours. We would go around the water here. Here in this first stop is where we would talk about the formations. Over here you can see this dry entrance. That is where colonizers discovered the cave in 1795. Down this passageway, these are where the pockets of soot are. It's where you can see this, the rock just looks black. And then down here is where the lake was made. Like I said, it was don't know if I mentioned this, but it was a man-made lake to use for that hydroelectricity. So it's not natural, but it was man-made for the hydroelectric purposes. It's called Lake Nittany. And yeah, this is just a little run through of the route that we would take. We would go down here, make a little loop on the lake, and then come back to the dock. So some other opportunities that are available at the facility, like I've mentioned a few times, is the wildlife park. So I could do this sort of environmental education job, but for the wildlife park instead of the cave, or even possibly work as a keeper or a handler at the wildlife park one day as well. That's really my area of interest. That's what I'm interested in, is animals, either zoology or animal behavior, something like that. So that really sparked my interest. And so this internship could also kind of open the door to other types of opportunities, like at other types of national parks, state parks, things like that, or other wildlife parks as well. Or like I said, for my personal interests with animals, maybe even some zoos or reserves, this internship that was environmental science related and biology related really kind of opened the door and opened my eyes to the other opportunities that are available for internships in this field. And then finally, some advice I have for EVS students looking for an internship is to look around. You never know where you'll find an internship. Especially this past summer, I really didn't think I would get one because of everything that was going on. Most of the places I applied to had either shut down for the season or were no longer hiring. So you really just have to look around, apply to everywhere and anywhere that you think you'd be interested in. But then also with that comes patience. So like I said, especially for this past summer, for a long time, I didn't think I was going to be able to get an internship. Thankfully, I got really lucky and I was able to do one. So, and use it as my capstone. So that was, very fortunate, but it might not always happen that way. And, like I said, I was really interested in doing something with animals, but this was also an internship that I got to be outdoors, well, kind of indoors inside the cave, but in nature and appreciating nature all day. And that was something I was really interested in. And so, just being patient and looking around you and finding what you can and still enjoying it is really important little pieces of advice I could give. And then lastly, just be creative with what you want to do. I think environmental education is hugely important. I'm a big, advocate for education being an important part of any sort of process. I think the more we educate people, the more they will want to change things that need to be changed. But I, for some reason, never thought about having that as an internship. I don't know why, or as a capstone. I just never really thought about that. When I think of education, I think of, being a teacher. And that was not something that I ever thought would kind of work out for me. But I think it's really important and I really love doing it. I love sharing my knowledge with people. So I got to use that as my internship and I never thought I'd be able to. So I think that was really cool, and to just kind of think outside the box for what you might want to use as an internship. Maybe it's not necessarily something you're immediately thinking of, but maybe it's something that you're interested in and you can use as an internship and eventually as your capstone. So, be creative with what you want to do. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening. We will be having a virtual Q&A session on December 8th from noon to 1. So look out in your emails for a Zoom invitation for that if you want to come to that and hear more from me or the other EVS students that completed their capstones this year. If you have any further questions, please come to that. But thank you for listening, and I hope to see you then. Bye.